Have you ever wondered what truly sets human beings apart from the rest of the animal kingdom? It's not just tools, and it's not just basic language. It is something entirely unique: the capacity for exchange. In the natural world, no chimpanzee ever trades a banana for an apple with another chimpanzee. Animals do not engage in truck, barter, or commerce, but humans do. And this seemingly simple act changed the trajectory of our planet forever. Let's travel back in time, roughly 100,000 years ago. Imagine a world where different human species coexisted. The most prominent were the Neanderthals, possessing brains larger than ours and immensely powerful physiques. But what happened? The Neanderthals vanished, while our ancestors, Homo sapiens, conquered the globe. Why did a seemingly weaker species win? The answer lies here. Neanderthals did everything themselves, while our ancestors learned to trade. When two humans met and exchanged an arrow for an animal hide, an economic miracle occurred. Both walked away with something they valued more than what they gave up. For the first time in history, 1 + 1 did not equal 2. It equaled 3, 4, or much more. This is the phenomenon of ideas having sex. Just as sexual reproduction combines the genes of two parents to create a more evolved organism, cultural exchange allows ideas to merge, mutate, and give birth to entirely new technologies. Once ideas started having sex, technological progress began to accelerate exponentially. A hunter no longer needed to be an expert at both tool-making and trapping. He could focus solely on making the best bows and trade them for meat from the best trapper. This is the birth of specialization, or the division of labor. Specialization means efficiency. When you do one thing repeatedly, you find ways to do it faster, better, and with fewer resources. Think about this. Human wealth is not measured by the money in our banks, but by time. Specialization allows us to save time by relying on others to do things that would be incredibly costly for us to do ourselves. Imagine trying to build a simple pencil completely from scratch by yourself. You would have to chop the tree for wood, mine the graphite, smelt the metal ring, and harvest rubber for the eraser. Not a single person in the world, not even a genius, knows how to make a pencil entirely alone. The pencil is the product of a massive, collective brain. Thousands of people who don't know each other, speak different languages, and might even hate each other if they met, collaborate through the market to create an item that costs pennies. Rational optimism is not a blind faith in the future. It is the deep understanding that as long as humans are free to exchange and specialize, the collective brain of humanity will continue to solve seemingly impossible problems. Around 10,000 years ago, a monumental turning point occurred that completely altered the face of the Earth. Humans stopped wandering and started planting seeds. The agricultural revolution had officially begun. There is a romantic myth that the lives of earlier hunter-gatherers were a leisurely paradise. The reality was the exact opposite. It was a life plagued by violence, disease, and the constant looming threat of starvation whenever wild game ran thin. Farming and herding were not accidental inventions, but an inevitable survival strategy. By domesticating plants and animals, humans generated vastly more calories per square meter of land than they ever could by merely foraging what nature provided. Food surplus led to an explosive consequence: increased population density. When a piece of land could support thousands of people instead of just a few dozen, humanity's collective brain was suddenly upgraded to a 1,000,000 times more powerful version. Think about this. In a small hunter-gatherer tribe, if a genius invented a better trap, that idea could easily vanish if he died. But in a dense agricultural community, ideas were stored, shared, and continuously improved upon. It was high population density that fueled an unprecedented depth of specialization. When 90% of the population produced enough food for the entire community, the remaining 10% no longer needed to farm. They could become potters, blacksmiths, scholars, or administrators. This was also when the first cities emerged. Cities were not just places to live. They were the nuclear reactors of innovation. They were places where ideas from different trades collided, mated, and gave birth to new breakthroughs at a dizzying pace. However, history is not a straight line upward. Prosperity always attracts parasites. As wealth accumulated in cities, it also attracted autocratic kings, tyrants, and plundering armies. For thousands of years, we see a recurring pattern. Free trade networks create wealth, then a centralized empire rises, seizes that wealth by force, establishes heavy bureaucracy, taxes it heavily, and suffocates innovation. Look at the Roman Empire, or Eastern feudal dynasties. They were militarily grand, but they often maintained stability by tightly controlling the economy. When the state controls everything, technological progress almost grinds to a halt. Look at the Roman Empire, or Eastern feudal dynasties. They were militarily grand, but they often maintained stability by tightly controlling the economy. When the state controls everything, technological progress almost grinds to a halt. To understand the true power of commerce, we must look at nations that lived not by war, but by the sea. Think of the ancient Phoenicians, or later, the Dutch in the 17th century. These nations did not possess vast agricultural lands or armies of millions. Their greatest asset was their fleet and a cross-continental network of partners. They didn't conquer, they connected. Maritime trade forced humanity to solve a complex puzzle. How do you trust a stranger thousands of miles away who speaks a different language and worships different gods? The answer was the birth of trust-based institutions, commercial law, double-entry bookkeeping, and above all, money. Money is not just pieces of metal or paper. Money is the physical embodiment of standardized trust. When you accept a coin from a stranger, you don't need to know if they are kind. You only need to know that society recognizes the value of that coin. Commerce turned intertribal hostility into mutually beneficial cooperation. Look at this historical contrast. Complete self-sufficiency is the very definition of poverty. If you must make everything yourself, from your food to your clothes to your shelter, you will be desperately poor. Wealth only appears when you depend on others. This is a beautiful paradox. The more dependent you are on a global network of strangers for your daily needs, the more free and prosperous you become. Isolation is the enemy of progress. Interconnection is its lifeblood. Until the 18th century, humanity remained imprisoned in a cruel trap known as the Malthusian trap. This theory argued that whenever food production increased, the population would instantly grow until it outstripped supply, resulting in famine and war to reset the balance. For thousands of years, this trap seemed invincible. The world took one step forward, only to take one step back. A nation's wealth was always limited by the amount of land it possessed to farm and harvest solar energy through firewood and animal labor. But then, an unprecedented revolution in natural history occurred, shattering the Malthusian trap forever. Humans figured out how to unlock and exploit fossil energy, first coal and later oil. Understand the nature of coal and oil. They are not alien substances. They are concentrated solar energy stored underground for millions of years by ancient vegetation. Coal was essentially massive virtual acres added to the economy. Instead of cutting down entire forests for firewood, an act that would quickly destroy the environment, humans could now dig deep into the earth to extract energy 10,000 times greater without using a single square meter of surface land. This energy revolution amplified the power of specialization to infinity. A coal-powered steam engine could do the work of hundreds of men and dozens of horses, yet it didn't consume wheat, it never grew tired, and it never went on strike. Many critics of that era issued dark prophecies that machines would steal human jobs and plunge society into destitution. But history proved the exact opposite. Machines liberated humans from the most back-breaking manual labor and slashed the cost of goods to levels accessible to everyone. Thanks to fossil energy, for the first time in history, the chart of human income and population stopped moving in a jagged up-and-down pattern. It bent and soared vertically skyward in a magnificent parabolic curve. Entering the modern world of the 20th century, as the global population crossed the billion mark, old fears resurfaced. Top experts and scientists of the time unanimously issued a chilling warning: humanity was about to run out of food. Best-selling books of that era predicted that by the 1970s and 1980s, hundreds of millions would starve to death, and no miracle could save developing nations. But once again, the doomsday prophets were dead wrong. The miracle actually came from laboratories and experimental fields. This was the Green Revolution. Thanks to modern chemistry, humans found a way to pull nitrogen out of thin air to create synthetic fertilizer, turning barren lands into endless wheat fields. Simultaneously, high-yielding, disease-resistant dwarf crop varieties were successfully bred. Instead of expanding farmland by destroying forests, we doubled and tripled food production on the exact same footprint. Modern agricultural technology became the savior of wild nature. If we were to use 1950s farming technology to feed today's population, humans would have to plow up every single forest on Earth, including the Amazon. Agricultural intensification is what set land free for nature. If we were to use 1950s farming technology to feed today's population, humans would have to plow up every single forest on Earth, including the Amazon. Agricultural intensification is what set land free for nature. Throughout millions of years of evolution, our ancestors lived in a world fraught with danger. If you heard a rustle in the bushes and assumed it was a tiger, you survived. If you optimistically thought it was just a breeze, you might become dinner. We are the descendants of those who always feared the worst. The human brain is hardwired to pay attention to bad news multiple times more than good news. The media knows this perfectly. If it bleeds, it leads. Look back at past decades. We were told acid rain would wipe out European forests in the 1980s. We feared the ozone hole would destroy life by 2000. But what happened? Humans recognized the problems, collaborated, innovated, and solved them. Pessimism is useful for raising alarms, but rational optimism is what actually rolls up its sleeves and fixes the world. We don't solve problems by retreating to the Stone Age or stopping growth. We solve them by pushing creativity further. There is a hopeful economic law that few notice. As a nation gets richer, its environment initially worsens, but later becomes vastly cleaner. Poor people cut down forests to survive. Rich people spend money to plant trees and clean the air. Look at the River Thames in London. In the 19th century, it was an open sewer causing horrific cholera outbreaks. Today, that river is so clean that salmon and seals have returned to inhabit it. Prosperity gives us the resources to conserve. The trend of urbanization is also creating massive space for wild nature to recover. As billions of people move into high-density smart cities, they abandon vast rural areas, giving them back to wildlife. In Europe and North America, forest cover is growing back naturally. Wolves, bears, and apex predators are returning to lands they were driven out of centuries ago. This is unprecedented in industrial history. Human life is also improving spectacularly across every core metric. Over the past few decades, the global extreme poverty rate has plummeted from over 50% to under 10%. This is the greatest escape from destitution ever recorded. Life expectancy has soared, child mortality has plummeted, and global literacy is higher than ever. We live in an era where an ordinary person has access to knowledge and comforts far beyond those of ancient emperors. Entering the 21st century, the phenomenon of ideas having sex is no longer restricted by geographic distance or national borders. The advent of the Internet and the digital world has accelerated cultural evolution to the speed of light. Think about this. In the past, an invention in Europe took decades, even centuries, to reach Asia or Africa. Today, an open-source line of code written in Silicon Valley can be improved upon by a programmer in Mumbai overnight. Humanity's collective brain has now become a hyper-connected entity. When billions of minds are linked via the cloud, our problem-solving capacity increases exponentially. No problem, from climate change to precision medicine, is too vast for this network. The digital age is also breaking down old monopolies of knowledge. Previously, only the wealthy and developed nations could access grand libraries or elite universities. Today, a child in a remote Kenyan village needs only a cheap smartphone to access the entire sum of human knowledge. Pessimists often look at impoverished regions in Africa or parts of Asia and declare that they are doomed to stagnation. But they forget a great law, the capacity for technological leapfrogging. Developing nations do not need to replicate every costly step taken by the West. They don't need to lay down millions of miles of copper telephone lines. They leap straight to 5G mobile networks. They don't need a clunky traditional banking infrastructure. They utilize mobile money. Look at the rise of decentralized renewable energy. Just as mobile phones freed people from wire networks, cheap solar panels and battery storage are liberating poor villages from dependence on massive, centralized power grids. Free trade and the flow of technology are turning the world into a more level playing field than ever before. As poor nations join the global network of specialization, they don't just receive wealth. They contribute their own unique ideas to the collective brain. Human history is not a series of inescapable crises, but a continuous journey of solving problems through creativity. Every time we face a new challenge, the market and exchange trigger a fresh wave of innovation to overcome it. The greatest threat to our future is not climate change, not resource depletion, nor new technology. The greatest threat is conservative, autocratic ideologies that seek to close borders, suffocate free trade, and prevent ideas from having sex. When governments try to control everything from the top down, they damage the natural evolutionary mechanism of society. Progress is always bottom up. It comes from the freedom to experiment, the freedom to fail, and the freedom of millions of ordinary individuals to exchange. Be a rational optimist. Do not believe the doomsday prophecies that constantly flood the magazine covers. Look at the long-term data. Look at the power of specialization. and look at human collaboration. 200 years ago, our ancestors lived in a world of poverty, darkness, and disease. They could never have imagined the comfortable life we enjoy today. Similarly, the world of our descendants, 200 years from now, will be wealthy, clean, and wondrous, far beyond your wildest imagination. Humanity has found the magic formula for prosperity: trade, specialize, and let ideas meet freely. As long as we keep that flame of freedom alive, the future of the Earth will always be a hopeful, upward journey. To clearly see the difference between commercial dynamism and the suffocation of an autocratic state, look at the history of China during the Song Dynasty in the 11th century. This was once the most advanced economy in the world, on the verge of an early industrial revolution. During this period, the Song produced millions of tons of iron annually, invented gunpowder, the compass, and even the world's first paper money. They didn't grow wealthy through violent conquest, but through domestic and maritime free trade. But what happened next? Subsequent feudal dynasties, particularly the Ming, viewed the rise of the merchant class as a direct threat to the absolute power of the emperor. They decided to intervene from the top down. The rulers issued strict maritime bans, destroyed all large shipbuilding yards, forbade citizens from seafaring trade, and established total state monopolies over iron and salt. Within decades, the most dynamic economy on the planet was frozen. The lesson here is crystal clear. Wealth and innovation are never permanent if a society turns its back on free exchange. When a nation chooses isolationism and absolute control, it is manually unplugging its own collective brain. Today, there is a powerful cultural wave calling for humanity to return to a natural lifestyle, consume strictly organic food, and boycott modern biotechnology. They paint a romanticized picture of a pure past. But this is a dangerous romanticization based on a complete ignorance of historical data. Before the invention of chemical fertilizers and pesticides, agriculture was entirely organic. And the result? Famine was a regular, structural part of life. Organic farming yields significantly less food per acre than modern intensive agriculture. If we were to feed 8 billion people today using 100% organic methods, we would have to drag billions of people out of modern offices and force them back into manual labor on the fields. Furthermore, to compensate for the lower yields of organic farming, humanity would be forced to cut down the planet's remaining wild forests to create more farmland. This seemingly eco-friendly lifestyle would actually be a catastrophe for biodiversity. Rational optimism demonstrates that the salvation of the environment lies in high technology. The use of genetically modified crops, GMOs, dramatically reduces the need for chemical pesticides and water while maximizing food production on the smallest possible footprint. One of the greatest anxieties of our time is resource depletion. We fear running out of oil, rare earth elements, and fresh water. But this fear ignores a core element of human ingenuity: substitution. In the 1970s, sensational scientific reports claimed the world would completely run out of oil before the year 2000. The reality was the exact opposite. Today, the world's proven oil reserves are vastly larger than they were half a century ago. Why this paradox? Because when a resource becomes scarce, its price rises. A rising price is a powerful signal that triggers the collective brain into action. It incentivizes engineers to find new deposits, invent more efficient extraction tech, or discover substitutes. Recall how we used whale oil for lighting in the 19th century. As whales were hunted to near extinction, the price of whale oil skyrocketed. This very price pressure drove humans to seek a substitute: petroleum from the ground. Petroleum saved the whales. Recall how we used whale oil for lighting in the 19th century. As whales were hunted to near extinction, the price of whale oil skyrocketed. This very price pressure drove humans to seek a substitute: petroleum from the ground. Petroleum saved the whales. The nature of progress is that we never use up the very last drop of something before moving on to something better. The Stone Age didn't end because the world ran out of stones. The Oil Age will not end because the world runs out of oil. It ends because we found smarter ideas. There is a brutal truth in ancient history that few dare to confront. Before the advent of machinery, the only way for a person to enjoy a luxurious, leisurely life was to exploit the labor of others. The prosperity of ancient empires was built entirely on the backs of millions of slaves. To build pyramids, temples, or simply to maintain an aristocratic lifestyle, a massive amount of mechanical energy was required. Human and animal muscles were the only resources of the time. Slavery was not just a moral failure, it was a core economic engine of the agrarian world. But the arrival of coal and the steam engine completely rewrote this equation. A single ton of coal could generate the energy equivalent to the labor of a healthy human working continuously for several years. Suddenly, humanity discovered mechanical slaves. Today, an average citizen in developed nations has hundreds of energy slaves working for them every single day. When you turn on your washing machine, drive to work, or board a plane, you are consuming energy equivalent to hundreds of people serving you. It was technology and cheap energy that made slavery economically obsolete, even before it was banned morally. When machines became cheaper and more efficient than human muscles, the need for physical exploitation plummeted. Our freedom is fueled by energy. Critics and pessimists often point to Africa and declare that the region has been permanently left behind, that the global wealth gap is an unbridgeable chasm. But they are viewing the world through a static, outdated lens. The truth is, the global wealth gap is narrowing at an unprecedented pace. The global Gini coefficient, the measure of inequality among all human beings on Earth, is steadily falling as poor nations grow faster than rich ones. Compare the historical trajectories of Botswana and Tanzania. After gaining independence in the 1960s, both were among the poorest nations in Africa. Yet, they chose two completely different paths to development. Tanzania followed a centralized socialist path, nationalizing land, suffocating free trade, and controlling prices from the top down. The result was prolonged economic stagnation, plunging its citizens into deep poverty. In contrast, Botswana chose to protect private property rights, encourage foreign investment, open up trade, and maintain a transparent rule of law. Within decades, Botswana became one of the fastest-growing economies in the world. This proves that poverty is not a geographical or racial destiny. It is the result of bad institutions. When people are granted property rights, freedom to trade, and protection under the law, prosperity will naturally sprout anywhere. The greatest challenge of the 21st century, without a doubt, is climate change. This is the two-headed beast that pessimists use to terrify the younger generation, painting a future where the earth burns and humanity is doomed. But rational optimism does not run away from this reality. It confronts it by asking a different question. Do we solve the problem by panicking and stopping growth, or by accelerating technological innovation? Remember that urban history once faced a seemingly insurmountable environmental crisis in the 19th century: horse manure. As urban populations exploded, the streets of London and New York were drowned in thousands of tons of manure, spreading terrible diseases. Experts of that era prophesied that by 1930, streets would be buried under 9 feet of manure, paralyzing transport. Their solution? Call on people to stop traveling. But instead, an invention emerged: the automobile. The automobile is viewed as a polluter today, but at its birth, it was the greatest environmental savior, clearing manure and disease from cities overnight. We solve old pollution by creating new, cleaner technology, not by retreating into the past. The same is happening with today's carbon crisis. The solution is not to force poor nations to stop using energy for economic growth, an immoral act that would imprison billions in darkness. The solution is to make clean energy cheaper than fossil fuels. Thanks to market forces and competition, the cost of solar energy and battery storage has plummeted by over 90% in just the past decade. Next-generation nuclear energy, safer and more efficient, is also poised to enter the game. Human adaptability is limitless. We will not burn. We will build better seawalls, develop heat-resistant crops, and green the deserts using advanced desalination technology. The future belongs to those who act, not those who fear. To describe this entire massive network of human exchange and self-organization, great economists used a beautiful term: catalaxy. It means the transformation of enemies into friends through trade. Catalaxy is a system without a commander. No global government coordinates the flow of goods from Shanghai to New York. No single minister decides how many loaves of bread your city needs tomorrow. Yet, fresh bread is always on the shelves every morning. This is the invisible hand operating on a global scale. As each individual freely pursues their own interest and specialization, they are inadvertently contributing to the well-being of millions of others they have never met. The essence of human intelligence does not reside within any single brain, but between them. A lone genius on a deserted island is helpless. But a group of ordinary people linked by the market can build the most miraculous things. History has proven, as long as we keep ideas free to have sex, keep borders open to trade, and preserve trust among strangers, prosperity will never grind to a halt. So, turn off the sensationalist news channels that peddle fear every day. Step out into the world, trade, collaborate, and innovate. Be a rational optimist, because our future is brighter than anything you can possibly imagine. Throughout most of history, technological inventions occurred accidentally and sporadically. A blacksmith stumbled upon a new metallurgy formula. A farmer happened to discover a seed hybrid. But in the 19th century, a revolution in creative thinking itself took place. We invented the method of invention. This was the birth of systematic research and development, R&D laboratories. Thomas Edison did not just perfect the incandescent light bulb. His greatest contribution to humanity was establishing the Industrial Research Lab model at Menlo Park. There, innovation no longer relied on lone geniuses, but became a collective process of planned, continuous trial and error. Many believe that patents and intellectual property monopolies are the sole drivers of creativity. Yet history reveals an opposite truth. Overly restrictive legal barriers often suffocate progress. When ideas are locked away in legal vaults, they cannot meet and have sex to generate the next generations of technology. Look at the smartphone in your hand. It is not a single invention. It is a fusion of a touchscreen, GPS tracking, silicon microprocessors, and lithium battery technology. All of these puzzle pieces were developed independently by different research teams worldwide. Great innovation is actually the art of connecting existing ideas. Trial and error is the only pathway to evolution. No centralized planning committee, no matter how wise, can predict which technology will win. The free market acts as a massive evolutionary laboratory where millions of ideas compete openly to find the optimal solution. In this evolutionary system, failure is not a waste of resources. Every bankrupt business and failed startup sends valuable feedback to the collective brain, pointing out dead ends and helping future generations chart a better path. Prosperity is built upon a graveyard of failed experiments. Pessimists often point to major financial crises in history, from the Great Crash of 1929 to the subprime debt crisis of 2008, to declare that the free market is inherently unstable and self-destructive. But they confuse temporary fevers with the long-term trend of human progress. Speculative bubbles are actually a side effect of humanity's over-enthusiasm for the future. When a groundbreaking new technology emerges, capital rushes in with fierce optimism, creating a chaotic yet highly energetic investment fever. Recall the railway mania in 19th century Britain. Hundreds of railway companies were formed, millions of pounds were raised, and subsequently, most of those companies collapsed when the bubble burst, wiping out the fortunes of countless gullible investors. But what happened after the fever subsided? Investors lost their money, but tens of thousands of miles of steel railway tracks remained firmly on the ground. That physical infrastructure permanently transformed the British economy, slashing transport costs and fueling a new wave of growth. The exact same pattern repeated with the dot-com bubble in 2000. Billions of dollars evaporated alongside pet store websites and immature internet startups. Yet, it was that massive capital surge that funded the laying of millions of miles of transoceanic fiber optic cables. When the bubble burst, cheap broadband infrastructure remained, paving the way for today's mobile and social media revolution. The market possesses a brutal yet highly efficient self-cleaning mechanism. It purges terrible business models and punishes greed, but always leaves behind invaluable physical and intellectual legacies for humanity to build upon. A crisis is merely an exhale in the breathing cycle of progress. Why do some nations rise to become symbols of prosperity, while others remain trapped in the mud of poverty? The answer does not lie in natural resources, climate, or geography. It lies in institutional structure, top-down versus bottom-up. Look at the Korean Peninsula. In 1945, North and South Korea shared the exact same culture, language, history, and geographical conditions. Yet today, the boundary of the 38th parallel divides two completely different worlds. The North chose a total top-down control model where the state decides what people eat, where, and where they work. The result was stagnation, destitution, and horrific famines. The South chose to protect private property, encourage free trade, and let individuals decide their own destinies. The result was an economic miracle that propelled them into the ranks of the most advanced nations on Earth. Recall the Berlin Wall during the Cold War. The same German people possessing the same superior technological foundations, yet East Germany was choked by the bureaucracy of a planned economy, while West Germany boomed under a free market model. The fall of the Berlin Wall was not just a political event. It was physical proof that walls of control are always shattered by human aspiration for free exchange. Top-down control models always fail for a simple reason. No group of experts or policymakers, no matter how brilliant, can possess all the decentralized information scattered throughout a society. Only the market, through the mechanism of free prices, can process the vast flow of information from the actual needs of millions of people every single day. Spontaneous order is the magic of humanity. It operates just like a coral reef or a natural forest. No one designs it, no one commands it, yet every component self-adjusts to create an incredibly harmonious and resilient ecosystem. As we look into the future, the next frontiers of ideas having sex are opening up at transcendent boundaries, the intersection of biology, computer science, and artificial intelligence. In biotechnology, humans are no longer just passively observing nature. We are learning to program it. DNA is essentially an informational code. By reprogramming genetic sequences, we are entering an era of wiping out horrific hereditary diseases, engineering crops that clean the environment, and producing ultra-durable biomaterials. Many fear that artificial intelligence, AI, will steal our jobs and destroy humanity. But through the lens of rational optimism, AI is not a threat, but the ultimate amplifier of our collective brain. It can digest the entire sum of human knowledge and identify connections that no single human mind could ever perceive. Imagine an AI system scanning millions of medical research papers worldwide in seconds, discovering a hidden connection between a forgotten chemical compound and a cure for a terminal disease. This is not replacing humans. This is the collective brain operating at the speed of light. We will not be replaced by machines. We will co-evolve with them. Just as the steam engine liberated and amplified human muscles, artificial intelligence will liberate and amplify our minds, opening up creative horizons far beyond anything we can comprehend today. Doommongers will continue to paint dark visions of robot uprisings or biological disasters. Those risks are real and must be navigated with wisdom. But the solution has never been to stop progress or retreat into history. The solution is to keep innovating, build better institutions, and advance education. The human journey is a series of proud leaps over seemingly immutable limits. We have crossed oceans, conquered plagues, illuminated the night, and touched the stars. There is no reason to stop now. Keep faith in the power of freedom, exchange, and collective intelligence. Because the future is not something to fear, it is something to create.